So what about aquaponics? What do we do? Well, it refers to any system that combines conventional aquaculture with hydroponics. So when I can take hydroponics and aquaculture. So we put them together. What does that mean? Well, that's basically taking a fish system to get the nutrient cycling with growing plants. So excretions from animals being raised in the water are fed to the hydroponic system where the byproducts are broken down by nitrification bacteria and are utilized by plants as nutrients. So in the soil food web, we can see this happening in a more dynamic way, but it happens in a pond also. So what we have is a nitrification bacteria break down nitrites into nitrates, okay, or nitrates into nitrites, at which time the plants can take up one form but not the other. So we want to look at that relationship, but that relationship works much better when you take that nutrient-laden water and put it onto soil, because the soil has much more of these nitrification bacteria per square inch than you would find in the hydroponic system. Okay? So in that instance, we can convert more nutrient to the plant root in fashion than they can in the other system, besides the issue of algae, soil-borne diseases, and insects. So in aquaponics, people are enthusiasts of aquaponics, and these are true things. They say that watering is integral to aquaponics. So if we're doing a garden, and I'm in my garden and I have to water every day, and I calculate that every day I need to water, and to water the size of Raktamachat's garden in one day with a simple garden hose, it takes 8 hours, and equal to the automated watering system that we have that will do it in 1 hour. So you would have to hold a hose for 8 hours for the amount of water flow of our watering system for 1 hour. So by automating my watering system, I've saved my capacity of 7 hours of watering. And whether I have to do it or I had to employ someone to do it to be able to sell the food, that energy and that time is still there. So these are reasons why we might look at automating our systems, investing in lowering these energies. And that's if those are not permaponic systems. But if I make one of the beds permaponic, it uses 90% less water. So then that even goes even further down. I only need to run that pump if all of my beds are permaponic, right? For 1/10 of that 1 hour. Well, that's a big difference. Okay, so I'm not wasting the energy, I'm not wasting the water. Makes a difference. So aquaponics is said to only use 1/10 of the water of soil-based gardening, or even less water than hydroponics or recirculating aquacultures. When we utilize the soil, an interesting phenomenon happens. The soil almost acts as an insulator. So from a concept, our water doesn't heat up as much. And a lot of issues they have with these types of aquaponics or aquaculture systems are that the water that's circulating through the growing beds heats up. So then they have to put their water into a reservoir to try to use the earth to cool it. Or in some instances, in large capacities, they actually put in like refrigerant units or air conditioning units in the reservoir to try to cool the water. Because you can imagine the sun is heating up the water. Hot water grows algae very well. So then they get algae problems due to the heat that's being built up in the system. But with our soil acting as an insulator, we don't have the heat buildup that we find in these other systems. So resources that are currently considered waste, right? In aquaponics. So there's no more toxic runoff from either hydroponics or aquaculture. And the same thing in permaponics. We're going to make what you might call a one-way system. We bring water in and we desire for nothing to come out. So there's no runoff or there's no leach it. Farming has tacked on a broad scale many times for what is described as nutrient leaching. So they'll use nitrogen fertilizers, but when it rains, they have flow through, same as we have in our garden system, and their nutrients will leach into the subsoils. And if you have a high water table, or maybe the farm is too near to a stream, those high nitrogen levels will get into the water table and or the stream and increase the phytoplankton, and you'll have fish kills. There's no difference of what's being described between a garden and a broad scale farm, only scale. So that farm's so big that happens, but we're still doing it on our small scale in the same quantity. So we want to look at how we can alleviate leaching, which is an agricultural problem. Garden chores are also cut down dramatically or even eliminated. These aquaponic growers are able to focus on the enjoyable task of feeding the fish and tending and harvesting the plants. So imagine if I'm doing rooftop gardening. I've set up my system. There's no, say, weeds nearby, so there's no going to be germination of weed seeds or weeds entering my system. So I shouldn't have to pick weeds all the time, or I'm not fighting weeds because they're not present. So I've alleviated these insect issues. I've alleviated soil-borne diseases. I've alleviated weeds. I've alleviated the issue to water to 1/10. I've alleviated leaching. These are reasons that we want to look at this as a, maybe say, some people will describe as the future of food. How do we grow food in more automated, more nutrient, and more closed loop systems, understanding the soil food web? So let's look at some types of systems that people like to build. A lot of these are highly popularized on the internet. You can see them on YouTube videos. So this first one's called the raft-based aquaponics growing system. It uses an international bulk carrier, or an ICB, to create a reservoir. Very simply, you take one ICB, you cut it into 2/3 and 1/3. You take the 1/3 upside down. That creates a water storage. You put the fish on the bottom, the plants on top. Very simply, they take styrofoam sheeting as it floats, little net cups as they're described. Typically inside the net cup, they take a piece of sponge. They cut the sponge into a square that will fit into the net cup. They insert with a knife, they cut that, they put the seed. The seed germinates inside the sponge, right? That then the roots go through into the nutrient-laden water that's being recirculated by a pump. Very simple, that's what's working. At the end, they pull up the plant, they take off the styrofoam piece, they would dispose of the styrofoam piece into the garbage, and then they'll put a new styrofoam piece with a new seed, okay? So in this system, you have plant, and the waste product would be the little piece of styrofoam, okay, over time, or sponge. So these are what's going on in that picture. Quite easy to set up. People like it. It's kind of fun. It's like a science experiment thing. Hey, if I get one of these things, they may consider it as you can maybe get the container free or at a very low price because they're waste. So it's like upcycling. I get an upcycle thing. I make it. It's cool. I'm growing my food. The thing that I would question is, what is the real nutrient density of those types of food? So if you're just eating them from a diuretic standpoint or as an additional thing to your diet, that's fine. If you're trying to like support your family and that's all you have, you may want to question the nutrient profile. And that's where more so permaponics comes in, because we want to grow not just what we might call leafy things like lettuces, leafy greens. I also want to be able to grow things like a bell pepper. I want to be able to grow tomatoes, cucumbers. I want to grow more dense, or i.e. what you may even describe as fruits. So from the aspect of a second successional grass, which we could say is a vegetable, to fruits, okay? So the concept that all things are vegetables is not true. We have herbs, we have fruits, and we have leafy greens, or what are described as grasses, okay? So typically here, you only see grasses growing. Grasses don't carry very much nutrition. For instance, lettuce takes more calories to digest than they have in lettuce, i.e. if you were to eat lettuce, you have to expend energy to process the lettuce. The definition of a diuretic. If I eat lettuce, I will lose weight, by definition. So what is aquaponics? Well, the second method that they used, and very popularized, easy to do, is called the media-based aquaponics. So they're going to start to create more structure, hopefully try to eliminate this styrofoam, or growing your food in floating styrofoam. People don't tend to like that. They also don't like the sponge because that's also a synthetic plastic. So I don't really want to grow my food in plastics. That's kind of weird. Okay, we move over to plastic, obviously being the growing bin, but we use structure. So we need to provide structure. When we provide better structure, we can grow larger plants. So here we can see a tomato, things like this, larger plants that need more structure. So that's what we're doing here. So you can see gravel, clay pellets, vermiculite, perlite, any of these types of mediums are being used. So the media provides both biological and mechanical filtration, so requires far less maintenance than the raft-based system. What is the maintenance? The maintenance is it doesn't tend to get algae and that sign of insect problems as much. It's got a little bit more of what we could describe a soil food web. Not a great one, but a little bit more is going on there than what we find. So there's more surface area, there's more effective microorganisms that are able to live there, but they still have problems with these insects living inside and other soil-borne diseases because it's still not what we might call a complete soil food web. It's not really a web, it's just a parts of a web. So that's where the, say, bad guys are able to infiltrate because you not have all of the necessary components, and then you have the desired problem. So the third method is called a hybrid aquaponics. And some people might see this video that are hydroponics enthusiasts and say, hey, you know, that permaculture stuff, that permaponics, that's just hybrid aquaponics. And the major thing I would say here is I wouldn't agree, because hybrid aquaponics, though a little bit more complicated in what they're doing, most of the complication is because they're having problems. So they have problems with filtration, they have problems with cooling, and they create more hybrid or complicated systems to alleviate these problems. But in permaculture, or in permaponics, we use soil. So our systems don't look Frankenstein-y as that. We have soil in the system, which alleviates those problems, and there is no soil in the system. So the difference here is soil. So yes, ours can be hybrid, there's no problem, but hybrid with soil versus hybrid without soil. And I would agree, yeah, we do hydroponics with soil, and we call it permaponics. So that's a combination of the two. The media beds become a pre-filter for the soil waste before the water enters the raft systems. So what was happening in these systems is your fish don't grow at the same rate as your plants. So my plants may be little seedlings, but I got this big fish, and that big fish keeps putting out the same output, but these little plants can't take that much output. But over time, the fish grows, but at a different rate. So it's getting bigger, but not really at the same growth rate as the plant. So the plant wants more food, but the fish isn't getting any bigger. And then you have a boom-bust cycle. If I want to harvest the fish, now I got no nutrient for my plants. If I harvest all the plant, I got no filtration for my fish. So they start to try to make the hybrid system to utilize more filtration. The filtration is they put in more rocks. The rocks act as a bigger filter. The interesting thing is that you could utilize a much smaller system if you utilize soil, especially with the biochar mix that we use, because we have so much more surface area that you don't have to have such a large system. Thus, you could reasonably grow more food in a smaller space with less money. And that's really what we want to start to look at and identify these issues. What's going on? How can I do less work, spend less money, grow more food? What is the nutritional value of my food? That's all we really want to focus on. And then my system affords me free time. One of the main issues of permaculture. Where's your balance and how much free time do you get? Right? Well, if I can grow my food for my family, it's nutritious with less work, it's more free time.